Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChainArgos. With me, as usual, every week, my CEO, Chief Data Scientist, Jonathan Reiter. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the comments. We'll get to them eventually. Thanks for all the feedback and likes and subscribes. We appreciate that. So on this week's episode, we're going to speak about BitSNARK, which sounds delicious, and we'll find out a little bit more about that. U.S. political donations and crypto. We've seen Trump is in Nashville, I think. Is that where he is? Speaking of some Bitcoin thing, we'll have a little bit. John will have a little bit to say about U.S. Political donations, especially as it relates to crypto stuff. Finally,
some amusing stuff to watch for.
2 years since DCG, and guess what? No money, so we're gonna celebrate that anniversary and get a little bit into that. And in today's episode, we're also going to provide you with a little bit of free education, because that's what we love to do on the show. And so we'll just be prepared for some of that. If you're tuning into us from the podcast, you may want to watch the YouTube video, simply because we've got a couple of slides for you from our joint venture with our Romanian friends called the Blockchain Intelligence Academy, and we'll be sharing a little bit more with you about, can a bridge ever be trustless?
This relates to BitSNARK.
So let's just jump straight into it. Tell us about BitSNARK.
So there's BitSNARK, and there's a Starkware related Bitcoin L2 thing. So people at the moment are publishing some work, presenting some ideas for how to build trustless L2 scaling solutions for Bitcoin. So this is interesting, in part because people have been trying to do stuff like this for 14 years, 13 years, 12 years, whatever, for a very long time. So as sort of a brief intro, Ethereum was developed to have a full-fat programming language. Bitcoin has a very limited programming language, but as in fact Craig Stephen Wright proved years ago, Bitcoin's scripting language is in fact Turing complete, so you can express any program you want in it. However, the amount of compute per block is very limited, so you can write very complicated programs, zero knowledge this or whatever, but they'll take a ridiculous amount of time to run. I mean, if you need 10,000 blocks for your program to execute, it's not going to be able to achieve anything trading-wise because that's at 100,000 minutes. So that's not going to fly. So most of the work, Lightning Network, historical scaling solutions focused on ways to just jam a summary of a bunch of transactions into a block, so somebody could run a reasonably trusted, reasonably off-chain service. Lightning is a centralized custodial, service. Each node is kind of its own thing, holding custody of all those funds. In some sense, this is not a podcast about issues with the Lightning Network. So one of the flaws that popped up immediately when that was developed is people discovered you needed to run things called watchtowers. So it was possible for somebody to steal your funds in certain circumstances using Lightning-like scaling solutions if you weren't constantly monitoring the network and able to sort of issue statements that somebody was trying to steal your money and block it. So that's a limitation. That's well acknowledged. The developers acknowledged that years ago. There's no controversy around that being true. People even talked about running those watchtower services for fees, and a whole thing started to get discussed in there. Fine. So what these guys have done now is they've taken some of the more recent changes to Bitcoin's programmability to find ways to make the blocks bigger for program space purposes. The BitSNARK solution and the Starkware solution are a little bit different, but same concept, finding a way to shove all the compute in there so that you can run enough calculations in one block to verify some kind of zero-knowledge proof something. The S in SNARK stands for succinct, so it's a small proof, argument of knowledge, right? That's what some of those letters stand for. Okay, and that's interesting, and they both have sort of different properties to them. Patrick alluded to with the trustless bridge thing. Both of these kind of run up against two problems. So the BitSNARK product is designed to allow layer 2s, so within the same trust domain, right? So you don't necessarily have a trustless bridge problem, but you have a theft problem similar to what the Lightning had. So people need to be around operating the system and issue claims that stuff is fraudulent, that fraudulent stuff is happening, to prevent your money from being stolen, tokens from being whatever transferred in ways you didn't want or disappearing. So again, it's not a system where you have full control over your coins. It's a system where you have full control over your coins as long as you pay somebody else to stay up all night and watch that nothing's bad's happening. That's not a trustless system. It's a compromise. It's a different kind of compromise. It's not a new compromise compared to the way Lightning worked or other historical Bitcoin scaling solutions. And it's interesting, however, because they certainly made it's better, it's tighter, it's cleaner, it's more sort of mathematically pretty.
Yeah.
Starkware solutions both more general and suffers from the bridge problem, which our bridge trustless impossibility education expert will take over from me in a moment on. So they've got a generic computation solution here where you can verify on Bitcoin, again, by finding a clever way to jam more computation into one block, a way to verify a generic proof. So it's not just for L2 scaling. You could prove in principle anything, any sort of statement expressible in their very rich language. The problem is, if those statements are about things outside the Bitcoin trust domain, they're not L2s, they're about bridge to avalanche or whatever, you have no way of trustlessly conveying that information back and forth. So you're left with some other variant of the problem here. It's not a solution, right? It's clever from a software engineering point of view in that they jammed a bunch of compute in, but...
What was the term they used? Near trustless, right?
The BitSNARK paper refers to it as near trustless. The Starkware work doesn't address that issue because they're simply saying they can trustlessly verify the zero-knowledge proof, which is a true statement. Nobody's arguing with that. The claim is that if it's attached to things that live off-chain, they still don't have a way to glue those together trustlessly, nor is there, which is what Patrick's going to sort of...
I'm no wordsmith, but what does near trustless mean?
Well,
to a layman,
people say trust minimized, but it's like we're almost pregnant.
What the hell does that mean?
Actually, not. It's a binary state, right? So in this case, it's near trustless in that you only have to pay somebody to monitor it 24/7 for you for one feature. But yeah,
almost pregnant.
Yeah, the plane landed almost safely, but
almost safely.
It's not.
Sounds about right.
The problem, of course, and this is not being unnecessarily pedantic or difficult, if there's a crack, the crack will be found, it'll be ripped open. If anybody observing the ecosystem hasn't figured that out by now, they haven't been paying a lot of attention. Right?
No, it gets boring from time to time. Maybe people don't pay attention.
So the key issue here as far as the Starkware thing is concerned is that they have a very clever solution for jamming a bunch of computation to validate any proof about a statement in the world. But there's no way to attach it to the rest of the world. So just think of trying to verify a statement about a totally different blockchain. Avalanche is a different blockchain. Cosmos, something that's just different. And then Patrick's going to go through sort of a bit about the bridging.
I'm going to go through with you guys a little bit about bridging, and you'll be pleased to know that So we do a bit of work with the Marina government, and the Blockchain Intelligence Academy is our joint public-private partnership, and we provide a whole bunch of training. So if you're interested in this, please don't forget to drop us a line. But that's not the point here today. So the question then becomes, can a bridge be trustless? I think is a reasonable question to ask. So it's important to remember that a bridge really is nothing more than a type of smart contract. So it's just a special name given for a special type of smart contract, but at its core, it's just a smart contract. So on certain blockchains like Bitcoin, wrapping Bitcoin, so that it could be used, say, on the Ethereum blockchain or stuff like that, would usually require some kind of custodial service to be used. So like, I think, I can't remember what's the name of the company that does that. Is it BitGo?
BitGo's the custodian.
BitGo's the custodial. Yeah. So they'll wrap BTC for you, and they'll call it WBTC, and then you can use that on the Ethereum blockchain. So the question then is, how does the smart contract or the, on one, let's say, for instance, if it's not a Bitcoin, and how does the smart contract on one blockchain, say Polygon, speak to the smart contract on a different blockchain, say Ethereum? And how does the smart contract know to automatically mint tokens on the other blockchain if it represents the tokens locked on the first blockchain? These are reasonable questions to ask, because there's no way to really communicate across blockchains.
And we know, paper published, was it 2017, that there really is no way to do this trustlessly. So we're not faulting anybody for bad engineering.
Yeah.
It's been proven, not by me, by other people. It's mostly Imperial College, I think, folks. Anyway.
Yeah, so, the most important thing is the communication. So if you've played that game Broken Telephone before, if the messages are bad, the outcome is also unintended. Oftentimes. So just recall that there is no way for one blockchain to communicate with another. So when someone advertises they're setting up a trustless bridge, well, they're lying.
Well, this is a mathematical thing. This has been proven. So all this and every scheme that's out there that anybody's ever looked at, you can pretty quickly find where it's a multi-sig, right? Or there's an economic incentive to not lie, but that's not trustless.
Because all bridges require a trusted third party, and this is kind of how it works in reality. We've extrapolated a lot of the complexity, but first, tokens on one blockchain, so in this case, Matic tokens, are sent to the bridge on the Polygon blockchain to be bridged to Ethereum, and then that smart contract calls in a software program that's not on the blockchain. So it could be a private server somewhere, like Google Cloud, AWS, Microsoft's Azure, anywhere.
It's not going to be on Azure, though. Nobody would do that.
But anyway, that off-chain software program then triggers the Ethereum smart contract bridge to mint the wrapped Matic tokens for use on the Ethereum blockchain. And as you can see their hands at that keyboard, the reason their hands at that keyboard is because this isn't, it can be automated to a certain extent, but it's not like there isn't a level of intervention that exists away from the blockchain. And the minute that there is an element that exists away from the blockchain, guess what? You need to trust the thing that's in between.
It's automated like a climate control system at home. It's automatic, but you can still change it.
So then the question then becomes, how decentralized are blockchain bridges? Remember, there's no way for different blockchains to communicate with each other. So as you can renounce the smart contract ownership, and I want to make that clear, you can renounce the smart contract ownership on either side of the bridge, but the off-chain communications, you play Broken Telephone, that it's the communication that usually gets people into trouble. Yep. So that's kind of what I had for you guys, just in terms of learning, just so that you can understand, visually how these things work. And then when you look at it visually, it's kind of easy to understand why, a trustless bridge just isn't possible.
And when you're talking about scaling within one ecosystem, if it uses all the same key infrastructure and the rest of it, you may well be able to scale up and down layer 1, layer 2 without having trust. Or maybe you will. That's a separate conversation. But if you want to go from one scheme to a different scheme, there's clearly going to be no way to trustlessly coordinate that communication. I mean, for example, if you're looking at Ethereum and any L2, it is reasonable to assume that the private key owner is the same on both chains, because that's kind of what it means to own the private key. Yeah. So if it happens to be two different people, that's not a security violation in the system, right? That's just a weird, coincidence in the world. The system's not secure against that. Whereas if the key schemes are just different, you couldn't build something around that assumption. Doesn't mean that many L2 schemes aren't centralized and custodial. It just means that you might have some more design space there, whereas a general proof statement about other stuff in the world is going to struggle confirming the inputs to that proof. The statements are actually accurate.
All right. So moving on, it's election season. So let's find out a little bit about these U.S. political donations that you've done some research on.
Well, yeah. So what I found amusing here, there's a lot of coverage about how some big crypto political fundraising things, this PACs and various U.S. political constructs, how somebody reported that one organization was claiming they'd raised, I think it was $178 million, but actually they'd only raised like $1 million, and $177 million were from some affiliated political action committee thing. So what I find amusing here, politics in the U.S. the political financing in the United States is complicated and weird, but there are essentially three categories: stuff that's illegal, stuff that's given directly to candidates that can support candidates that has reasonably strong restrictions, and then reasonably unrestricted donations to registered political action committees, which are kind of like the political version of nonprofits that aren't allowed to coordinate their activities with specific candidates or political parties, but they can advocate for issues. if that sounds ridiculous, it is. Stephen Colbert did a wonderful series on this a long time ago that he won a bunch of journalism awards for. I'm sure you can find that on YouTube.
That was I think that was the Colbert Report.
Yeah, it was on the Colbert Report. The Stephen Colbert Super PAC, and you Google Stephen Colbert Super PAC if you're interested.
It's really good.
It's very funny. He did a fantastic job explaining the weirdness, and a serious campaign finance lawyer he hired as his lawyer was on TV. It was fantastic. That guy had been on the election commission and all kinds of stuff. What the important part here is that you've now got, at least for that one organization, almost $200 million that is not allowed to be coordinated with politicians, like not allowed, and people do get in trouble for coordinating. The definition of coordinating is a mess, but you certainly can't directly talk to them about it. The FEC does police this stuff, or they will investigate reported violations. And a lot of this money is held by people that seem to have a history of thinking that the rules don't apply to them. So I'm very curious what's going to happen here, because if you saw, for example, somebody that worked for one of these political action committees on stage with a candidate endorsing them, that's an immediate go-to-jail situation. And the one thing that politicians like about the current fundraising system in the United States is that they know how it works, and they know how to get money for their campaigns. And if somebody threatens to blow that up, that is not going to be well received no matter what issues you stand for. Right. No one is going to want to watch the current system ripped up, because if they have to start over, like pre-Watergate, start over with the 50 years of rules we have in place now, I don't think any politicians are interested in that one at all. So it's interesting the extent to which you have lawyers involved in a lot of crypto stuff, and whether you think those are good lawyers, bad lawyers, confused lawyers. They're generally securities and contract law type lawyers. Lobbyist lawyers are very, very specific types of lawyers, and it's hard to imagine a lot of them being comfortable giving a whole bunch of crypto people at crypto events filled with politicians large amounts of money and telling them you can't coordinate with any of these politicians, and if you say something on camera, you're going to go to prison. We will see. And people have gone to jail for this stuff before. Well-known, wealthy, well-connected lobbyists have gone to jail for this stuff before. It is taken seriously only because all the politicians like the rules the way they are and don't want them upended, because they don't know how to operate then.
Some assume are good lawyers.
Yeah, so so when you see these headlines that, most of the money went to this nebulous political action committee, know that that thing cannot coordinate directly with politicians. And if you see it doing that, someone who doesn't like those politicians, because they're all running against somebody, right? Even if the guy's going to get 90% of the vote, or the woman's going to get 90% of the vote, somebody's getting 10% of the vote and doesn't like them, because it's an adversarial system. So they are highly incentivized to report that stuff if they find it. Particularly if you could report it before the election and get the person in trouble, then you would win, even if you were going to lose without it. And there's a tremendous opportunity for, comedy. This is not about one party or the other, one issue or another, right? This kind of stuff is...
It's comedy gold.
It could be comedy gold. It could be interesting to watch, particularly if a lot of the people feel like the rules don't apply to them.
That seems to be the general sentiment in this space.
There is enough of that going on that I would be concerned about handing 9 figures of money to people that were in the rooms with politicians but not allowed to coordinate with them, and in front of cameras all the time. Politicians love being in camera, and you will know by the look on the politician's face if something like that has happened, because they are not risking their career for you.
So finally, 2-year anniversary of DCG, and as you have predicted, and on this, you've seen it on this podcast as well. We're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, so it's 2 years this week from when I had originally published a very long piece about 3 arrows and DCG's circular financing entanglements, and I think I finished it by saying something like it should be easy for the regulators to figure this one out if they get all the documents. That was wrong. I think the rest of the piece was spot on. That was a mistake. It's not been figured out that quickly. Progress is being made in a lot of directions. It's amazing to me that Barry's been able to hold these people off for this long.
Yeah.
And this is still continuing. I don't know what the plan is there. One common strategy is, because he's got a lot of money, right, is to just keep defending until the other side runs out of money or gives up. I think the other side's got money too. There have been some interim settlements and whatnot, but the state of New York is still going after him for, I believe, criminal stuff.
Yeah.
And while there's a partial resolution on the Gemini front, there's still a lot of open stuff. The 3 arrows thing is still proceeding.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is still proceeding.
Yeah.
So this is going to go on for a long, long, long time. What I find most interesting, however, is the proximate cause of the DCG Three Arrows explosion was the Luna collapse.
Of course.
Right. And we now know, I think with absolute certainty, that almost every part of the system was insolvent as of the Luna weekend. And we've been Celsius. Everybody was insolvent as of then. And we're still sweeping through bits of that process. I had some Twitter argument with somebody this morning about some Celsius clawback claims that we were talking about 2 years ago.
This is well established by, this is not the end of it.
I mean, before Celsius filed for bankruptcy, we were talking about how the Celsius creditors were going to experience clawbacks they weren't prepared for.
Yep.
Not because we think it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Whatever. We didn't make the system.
It's a thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you could see that happening far in advance. It's playing out, of course, as expected. But
it happened with the Madoff guys as well. So
the procedure for Ponzi scheme resolution is
there is a very strong precedent for these things, and it's unfortunate as it is.
That the Genesis stuff is still unclear is a bit strange. The FTX stuff has been not entirely resolved, but primarily resolved. Having said that, look, Mt. Gox, that was the worst trading platform I've ever used. But anyway,
these things take time, right? The wheels of justice grind slowly.
Oh, that is absolutely true. The Celsius clawbacks are another another sign that a lot of this stuff is still proceeding, and you cannot outrun it. Right? It will get there. They absolutely don't get 100% of everybody, but once a large service files for insolvency, the liquidators, and people are seeing this with Celsius, with FTX, with the lawyers are spending a lot of money going after stuff because they bill by the hour and they have an incentive to reasonable claim, right? File it and keep going. It's the system. Like the system, don't like the system, it's the system.
In some ways, it's like, being tied to the rails and watching like a snail the size of Godzilla slowly coming towards you. It's coming. It's not really fast.
Sounds like some kind of weird Japanese anime.
But it's coming, and eventually you get sucked in under that big slipper shoe of its that the snail has.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of this stuff is still proceeding apace. There are plenty of things to still be resolved from that era, some of which haven't even come out yet, which will get resolved. The ZK Sync era? That era. Well, that's the only product with era in the name, I think. Yeah. It's the pre-ZK era, because nobody was talking about zero knowledge at that time. Starkware had launched or had not launched? Maybe had launched.
Maybe.
I don't remember.
I don't recall.
Maybe testnet, or I don't remember. So that's it's 2 years of a slow march, and I will say that there's a lot that can still be seen going forward that's not been resolved yet, and definitely will be. Because the large stuff, the large institutions, this stuff will all get resolved. It's the smaller, maybe medium profile stuff that you might not get resolved. But if you're a creditor for something that's already gone under, you should be aware. If you transacted a fair amount with, you should be aware of that.
All right, and on that note, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your comments, your likes, and your subscribes. Keep them coming in. We know we've had a couple of show requests. We'll get around to them as and when that opportunity arises. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you again next week. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to catch part 4 of John's one-on-one with Dr. Rivera from the ICI Bucharest.
It's not a one-on-one. Radu interviews.
Oh, yeah.
It's a 2-on-1, I guess. But
it's a 2-on-1. Or a threesome. So don't forget to catch that exclusive, and that'll be coming out in the next couple of days. Otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week. See ya. Bye bye.